Okay, so continuing on, verse 35. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. He had a small boy with him, and he said to the boy, "Run and find the arrows I shoot." As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, "Isn't the arrow beyond you?" Then he shouted, "Hurry, go quickly, don't stop." The boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. The boy knew nothing about all this, only Jonathan and David knew. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, "Go carry them back to town." After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" Then David left, and Jonathan went back to the town. So, as you mentioned, Jonathan here is a pretty good shot.
Yep.
He puts the arrows right where he wants them to do. And so he obviously gives the signal. The original plan was if he shoots them to the side of Jonathan, he says, "Hey, they're just right over there." He says, "You're safe." He says, if he shoots them beyond him, he says, "Go further." That's the signal to David to run, to get out. And so I'm sure that they devised this plan, just in case, because when I read this and then we hear at the end they weep together, they embrace each other.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, why did they devise this plan to begin to just to told him?
Exactly. Exactly. Just don't bring the boy with you and you're fine.
Right. Yeah. Like just come out and stuff. And so I read some commentaries and think about it, it's like, it's partly that may not have known that was going to be an option.
Right.
You didn't know who else could have been around. He wanted this sign to be secretive and not obvious, and so he did that. And it turned out that the boy left, and he was able to speak to him. I think that's how we read into this story.
Yeah, I think that could be accurate. I think also maybe their grief gets the better of them, and they chance it at that point as well. So, but yeah, I think you're right. They had it set up to be secretive in the event that it needed to be.
Just in case.
Just in case. And then once the boy was gone and they realized, hey, nobody else is here, then they're going to honor their friendship, have a proper goodbye, and then David's going to run.
Yeah. And again, the heart of David is unlike anybody else's in the Bible, obviously probably except for, Jesus and a few others. He bows down to him. He is the future king of Israel.
Yeah.
He bows down to the son of the current king because he's the son of the current king.
Yeah.
He respects Jonathan not only just as a friend, but as the authority that he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is the relationship of David and Jonathan then beyond that. So first of all, to your point, David understood his place. Right? David understood Jonathan's place.
Yeah.
But they still had this incredibly tight relationship, this tight-knit friendship that is unlike many friendships that any of us have really ever experienced.
Oh, yeah.
And I think so much so that this is why their friendship kind of gets denigrated by people who don't believe in the Bible and people who don't.
Yeah.
People who look at it with a modern eye
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we understand brotherhood as well as David and Jonathan did.
Yeah.
Right? There is something to be said about a true camaraderie between men, and maybe it makes sense that they were both warriors. Maybe it makes sense that they've gone to battle together.
Yeah.
You'll hear stories about that. I've never served, but you hear stories about the forms of brotherhood and in those moments. And so there is something special there with the relationship. And this is something that I think all of us wish we had to a degree, and those who have found friendship this deep and this, this trusting, I think that is something that you should honor. That is something you should hold on to. And that is something that you should value. So, be good to your friends, and don't be afraid to build close friendships. And if you're going to do that, you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You have to understand your place. You have to understand their place. And both of you kind of have to be on the same page.
Yeah. This is David and Jonathan, this is like the shining example of what Christian friendship should be.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've heard, multiple, I had a pastor when I was at my old church. He went through a series on the life of David, and it wasn't I mentioned earlier that I was listening to a sermon series written by David Jeremiah. I wasn't going to David Jeremiah's church. This was two different
Right.
times. But so my old church did it, and this story, he talked all about Christian friendship and male Christian friendship, and this is. I mean, how many times have you wept with your male friends?
Yeah,
I mean,
not often.
you don't. Not only do you not want your male friends to see you cry, you usually don't cry together.
Yeah.
And this also just shows that. I think it's very interesting that the writer of this put, but David wept the most. They made sure that we knew that.
Yeah, we're also afraid of affection between men, right? And we label that in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
Or ascribe it to something else that is not of God, right?
Yeah.
And these are things that, affection between brothers is fine.
Yeah.
I think the telltale line in this is in verse. Let's see, where was this at? It was verse 17. And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him because he loved him as he loved himself.
Yeah.
This is what Jesus tells us.
Yeah.
To love others as you love yourself.
Yeah.
Right. This is what he taught his disciples. This is what he taught his apostles.
Yeah.
You need to love each other the way you love yourself.
Right.
And this is one of the finest examples we see of that in the scriptures.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's obvious why they're distraught at this, because this is the point where David's like, I gotta go, I gotta run. It is not safe for me here, and so they're not even sure if they'll ever see each other again at this point. I mean, spoiler alert, they'll see each other once more, and that's it. But yeah, they don't know what the future is going to hold for either one of them. Kind of it. I mean, they know that David won't be king because that's what God has appointed, right?
Oh, Jonathan won't be king.
Yeah,
right.
David will be king.
David will be king. As I said, would not be king. I'm
sorry. So they know that David will be king because that's what God has appointed, and they're both obedient to that. But as far as their friendship goes, they don't really know at this point, and that's part of why they're so sad here.
Right, and it's hard to be friends with someone when your father wants to kill you.
Very. Yeah, and you're. And again, I go back to. I mean, this is some Jerry Springer stuff. This is you've got the king, who hates David, who is his son-in-law, who is the best friend of his son.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
There's a lot going on here. So I think that if this is, I actually had. One of the pastors at my former church, actually the pastor that married my wife and I, he has several kids. His oldest son, he named him David. Then he had another son, named him Jonathan.
Oh.
And this is why, And he, when they were younger, he sat them both down. He's like, I want you guys to understand what Christian friendship means, what your names mean to each other, and both those boys are fantastic young men now. So
nice.
I think that there's this when you're talking about Christian friendship and male camaraderie, this is, when you want to learn about it, this is the place to go.